Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special guest, a great partner here with us at our team here at Spot On Solutions, Rod Cruce, who is the founder and chief growth officer over at Trifecta Growth Institute. Rod, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Hayden. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and appreciate the warm introduction there.
Yeah. Super excited to be able to chat with you. We've been chatting a lot over the last few months as we've kind of partnered on a few things marketing wise, but really excited to maybe take off our professional hats for a little bit and kind of chat a little bit. And I think this is going to be a great conversation to talk all the cool things you guys are doing over at Trifecta, but also just familiarize you with our audience a little bit. And so I think that's kind of where I want to start, is just to kind of introduce you a little bit to our audience and talk a little bit about who you are and what your background is. So I'm going to kick it to you, Rod, kind of wherever you want to start. I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Well, I'm actually a retired Army veteran. I did 10 years enlisted and 11 years as an officer, with about 19 of it within the Special Forces or Green Berets. Also worked with a lot of Rangers, a lot of special mission units during that time. Been to a little bit of, I think my last count was now 46 countries.
Wow.
Throughout all the different continents. And so it's been a great fun time. And then also went to a lot of places that were not so fun,
Right.
and places I wouldn't probably choose as my first vacation spot. But yeah, so it was a great luxurious career. I really enjoyed it. And when I retired, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I get out. But when I retired, I'd already had a construction business where we were doing new construction and tract homes. And then that kind of dovetailed into more of the defense industry, and I went into more of the training and leadership development after that with another company I own called On Point Saliency. And then from there, we were working, doing a lot of projects with NASA, the Air Force, and numerous other defense locations across the world, in places like Africa, Afghanistan, Iraq. Some really multi-million dollar projects, upwards of over 100 million in a couple of instances. And that was really great. And then, sequestration took place in 2014, and I decided to go ahead and, not chase all the defense stuff and kind of expand my horizons, and entered into more of the restoration and the home services business at that point.
Yeah.
And have done that ever since. And I still do stuff with the defense industry and, with my other companies. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are today. Owned a restoration company for quite a few years, and then sold that, and then started Trifecta Growth Institute up and going on about 3 years ago now.
That's awesome. Well, I think there's so many cool directions I think we could go with this, because I think you come from a really cool background. But I'd love to talk a little bit about, something that I know you hold close to your heart, because it's what you do on a daily basis now, which is training, right? Like, training is a huge part of what you guys do over at Trifecta Growth Institute, but it's also a big part of what you did in the past. Like, I have a really close friend that is in naval special warfare, and he has been in there for several years, and it feels like the first 3 years is just been training. Like, so much of what he's doing is just learning and developing and honing these skills. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about some of the things that you learned about, like, training processes over your 20 plus years in the military. What do you feel like are some big takeaways that you took with regards to, like, training and those types of processes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hayden. Well, I don't know if people realize a lot of it, but I mean, of course, everybody knows there's a boot camp when you go in the military.
Right.
And that's kind of the indoctrinating of getting you in to understand the culture and kind of weed you out. It's kind of an interview process as well.
Yeah.
So that's where you really get that at the very beginning. And throughout my career, the one thing I would say about the military, they have a very nice progression program. Whether it's enlisted, which is kind of your blue collar portion of the military, or your officer, which is more the white collar and the leaders, they have a progression for every one of those that kind of go from, whether you're an E1, which is enlisted like first rank all the way up through your enlisted 9 or a sergeant major. And then same thing from O1, which is your second lieutenant, all the way up to a 4-star general, and 5 if it ever gets to that again. So as you start to make and progress, you go back to training numerous times for your professional development. And that professional development goes everything from culture to team dynamics, which is huge. Being able to assess your team, be able to determine what your team needs, being able to provide the training for your team individually and as a team. And that's one of our team dynamics for leaders was developed within Trifecta with that intent behind it. And then, how to handle conflict. And, it's kind of funny because you think, well, in the military, you are in conflict.
Yeah.
But in reality, we don't, I'm a 95% carrot guy and a 5% stick. So
Yeah.
I'd much rather be able to win the hearts and minds and get people to believe in what we're trying to do than trying to force them into it. And then so you have your kind of what I call your people skills or soft skills training you get and on how you're going to deal. Because we were working with diplomats in foreign countries, and that takes a special type of training and individual. Then you had your leadership skills in there that you were progressing with, and then you had your technical skills. And so you're always trying to enhance those to be a better person. If you go back to our education system, even back in the industrial age, we used to teach a lot of problem solving in our education system. It wasn't until probably the Koch brothers and of course the war took off where they came back from Prussia and they started putting things into a factory and assembly line.
Right.
And so our education system then went away from being more, problem solving and performance driven to being more of round peg, round hole. And so the military did that for a few years, but I'd probably say back in the late 90s, special forces, we have always trained in a more of an outcomes-based training. And that outcomes-based training is where you're going to see the biggest benefit. And same thing with adaptive leadership. And many times, I was a commander of a hostage rescue and counterterrorism team for Central and South America, the region there. And we stood up every unit in every country throughout that region. And so, we had to put in a training program for that.
Right.
That was over multiple months. So that's kind of my background in training. I did a lot of it when I was in the military. A lot of it was towards outcomes-based training, and then delivering training on an international front at all levels, even at the diplomatic level and those aspects of it.
Yeah. The people skills is something that I'd love to kind of pick your brain a little bit more about because, I don't come from a military background, but the little that I have read about, Green Berets like yourself is, a lot of those units and those groups and those people focus really heavily, like you're saying, on the people skills and on the winning the hearts and minds and working with diplomats. And that's a huge piece of what you guys did, at least again, from my little bit of understanding, that yes, you've got to have the technical skills, and people think special forces, like you guys are obviously combat trained and you know what you're doing there, but there's this kind of additional aspect where you're also going to be able to work with governments and like you said, leaders and different things. And so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about what was the people skills training like in the military? Because I feel like people, that's something that people don't, connect. They're like, there's no such thing as people skills in the military. I feel like, so talk a little bit about what was something that people skills training like?
From my perspective, I was in special ops for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I think it has a different focus than a lot of times what we call the conventional forces.
Yeah.
However, that changed a lot in the early 2000s. From an early stage, our motto was a quiet professional in the Green Berets, and you didn't want to stand out. You didn't want to toot your horn. But you also had to have the ability to influence nations. And so when you're talking about you're gaining rapport, and a special forces A team has 12 members on it. That's it. And they influence up to thousands. And so when you go in, you can't go in kicking and screaming and knocking all the doors down with just 12 people. You're going to get annihilated. I don't care how great you are. So you have to really establish the rapport. You have to understand and be able to, empathize with the host nation, what they're going through. Because I mean, a lot of people don't understand the third world nations. I mean, they're suffering. And
Yeah.
we don't realize how great we have it here in the United States. But the people skills is everything. When you can establish that connection, that rapport, and people are no different in a third world country than they are here, or even in another country in Europe or Southeast Asia or something like that. People are people. And when you make that connection and they realize that you are showing a genuine concern or a genuine pathway for them, and that, I mean, I have friends still today that from Afghanistan and Iraq that communicate, some of the interpreters that we use. And it's because that we always had that genuine concern for them, just like they were family. And so that takes a lot. And you have to realize that when you're far away, you don't, your teammates are your brothers, your family, and stuff like that, because they've got your back. But one person pisses off somebody, that's, pardon my language there, but if they say something and
Yeah.
it pisses off the entire, town, and they're tight knit, then you can find yourself in a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Now, correlate that to business. Okay. You're probably not going to be in one of those same situations. It may not be as dangerous, but it could be. But if you correlate it to losing business
Yeah.
or getting a
It's a big deal.
review,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. That's dangerous to your organization. So if you don't think about, if you can't make that correlation and say, you know what, these people skills are what I'm establishing a rapport with my homeowners or with my customer base, and I want to make sure that my employees are having the same messaging, one voice, right? And that's one thing we always say: it's one voice, a unity. And we're not going to, if there was a decision made that that's what we were going to, that's how we were going to conduct it, that's the way we did it. Even though you may not agree with it all the time, you don't create a divide amongst your team at that point, so
Yeah.
I think it's huge.
The relationship there. Yeah. I love that you drew that correlation, because it was 100% what I was thinking in my brain, that like, again, this is a stretch. And so I don't mean to make any offense or anything like that this is what's going on. But like you mentioned, like there are people in third world countries that are really suffering. And so you have to be able to go in there and understand and empathize with them as best you can if you're going to build those relationships. And it can be in a lot of ways. I mean, you owned a restoration company. A lot of our audience is in the restoration business. Like in a lot of instances, like you're going into a home where somebody has experienced a disaster, and it's like, it's very stressful and traumatic for them. Like maybe their house is burned down or their basement is flooded, right? Like it's a big deal for them. This is their life. And so you have to be able to immediately like build rapport and do it in a very quick setting. Like you don't have time to sit there and shoot the breeze with them for hours on end, where if there's like an active incident going on in their home, like you can't take all that time. And so you have to be able to build rapport, do it quickly, and empathize with those people. And I love that. Yeah, you kind of drew that correlation too, that it's very, again, it's not the same thing, but it is somewhat similar.
Well, a lot of times, after you go through emergency services and you start to do the demolition stuff, for them, it's like living in a third world country.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have all the cosmetic, the paint and everything else that makes it pretty. All they see a lot of times is, especially if you take a lot of things down to the studs, all of a sudden they feel like they're living in a unfinished home or a third world home country.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to be able to empathize with them, and you have to set that rapport. And when you can do that, I mean, I always use a correlation to, like, because we were a full service company, excuse me. And I said, when you go in as emergency services, you're the fireman, right? When you show up there, you're stopping the bleeding, stopping the water, you're stopping the damage, you're saving their home. So you're always going to be the fireman. But if you don't explain it well and you just start doing that, then you can be very quickly on the outside looking in, right?
Yeah.
Because then what are you doing? So you have to be able to have those people skills to be able to communicate up front what we're going to do, why we got to do it, how we're doing it. And you've got to be able to put that in a light that and be able to read people to see if they're getting it or they're not getting it. And that's one of the reasons we have, I mean, we just rolled out our learning center, and that's why we put a lot of those different people skills in there and put it at a very economical cost for people to afford it for their entire team. So customer service, stress management, time management, team building, all those things, because the more you can get people to understand that, you don't tell them what to say, you don't tell them what to do. What you're creating is an individual that can be adaptive, and they can understand and read the person, and then they can change how they're delivering it if necessary, or maybe ask a question, or maybe even just stop and take a moment and let them vent, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the fireman role. And when you come back in as on the reconstruction side, and now the nuance is kind of worn off. They're still kind of upset, but now then you've got to come in and you've got to try to get that home back where it's at. And sometimes you're the bearer of bad news because of their policy or something didn't get approved or something like that. So now you're kind of the police, which is
Right.
not always. Sometimes, you don't ever like a police officer's going to stop you and give you a ticket or tell you can't do something. And so now then you got to be able to take that in a way and say, okay, it's not that we can't do it. It was just we have to do it a different way, or what?
Right.
How do I deliver this? And then put yourself in those shoes as well, because it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, I've even noticed that in communication with my clients is like, you can say the same thing a different way, and it's gonna come across to that person much, much better. You can say the same thing. I train some of our team members, and I talk to, both team members and clients, and I'm doing all sorts of different things, but like, you can say one thing a bunch of different ways. And sometimes it's important to not say it the original way you were going to say it, and just
Yeah.
change it a little bit. And you can still get your same point across, but
Right.
say it in a way that helps them feel like maybe they're not being belittled or talked down to, or whatever it might be. And it's such a big deal. And it's often overlooked, especially in the
Right.
business world, that like, if you want to build that relationship and make sure that customer is happy or that client is happy, like, you've got to be able to get your point across, but in a
Right.
way that helps them feel like they're not being talked down to.
Exactly.
Which is
100%.
a crucial piece to it. I'd love to talk a little bit, because we've talked about kind of the correlations of the two, business world and training and different things like that. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you've seen this as well, that especially in the home services world, um, it feels like training is a lot of times the last thing business owners want to think about, especially owner operators, right? They've got so
Right.
much going on. They're wearing so many different hats that oftentimes training program is, hey, go follow this person around for a few days. Like, it's not really a training program. And so why, this is obviously something you've devoted your life to, and we're going to talk kind of more in depth about what is Trifecta, but like, why is having a training program or building a training program so crucial for a business owner, even a small home service business owner?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And number one, and it is absolutely crucial. But also within this industry, I think it's very well overlooked, and people are slow to do it. And there's a lot of, from my experience and from what we've worked with companies, and they're slow to move on it because, number one, they feel like it's reducing the amount of productivity they have as a team.
Right.
And so if they're taking them from doing work now then, and they're paying people to sit and learn and train, they feel like they're losing out on the bottom, losing from the bottom line. Now, that's a short-sightedness that you can see, and I do not disagree that when you first think of that way, that's probably the way to go look at it. But the benefits you get long-term are amazing. It's going to pay that back, because the unity you get with your team when you put in the training, it's going to be able to create that one voice. And it's also going to understand what even if you're an owner operator and you're the one single leader in that company, you're going to be able to get your philosophy down. You're going to be able to get what your vision is. You're going to be able to hopefully talk that through a little bit more. And the more you understand what your team is understanding or lack of understanding, it helps you learn yourself, and it helps you grow as a team. And you have to have that growing and nurturing culture. And when you can put that in play and people feel like you have their best interests, right? Remember I was saying that genuine value, genuine interest of their well-being. Now then you're going to get the best out of that person. They're going to give it 100%, because they think you got they don't think, they see that you have their back. And we have all these technical skills like water restoration tech, or WRT, and applied drying techniques and stuff of that nature. And we do that because it's mandatory. And
Right.
people do that because it's mandatory. But if you didn't do that and it wasn't mandatory, think about how much stuff think about when it did get surfaced, how many times you had to go back and fix something
Yep.
because your employee didn't understand it. And so there's a lot of benefit to that, and understanding which way you go, and you just get so much feedback by doing this, just for your own, validation of your people. Are they understanding what they should be doing?
Yeah.
And like, we are putting in like professional development programs. And so that's one of our first things we do if you call us and we're saying, hey, Rod, we want to, understand what we're doing here, what you do here. Well, we look at it from a holistic view. And we kind of say, well, what is your intention behind this? Why do you want to do this, or do you want to do it? And some people says, no, we do, like you said, we call them right seat brides. You know, and I can't tell you how many people have said, oh, no, we have our own training we do our own training. And when you ask them what that means, it means that they sit right next to the person, they ride in the vehicle, they go out, they shadow them.
Yep.
And now they, what makes you know? I mean, do you know if that person, who's doing the training, opposed to just taking them and showing the ropes? What if they don't know what they're talking about?
Right. That's the biggest thing I come back to.
2, 3, 4 people doing the same thing, which is maybe totally against what you're asking them to do, which could cripple your company or cost you even more dollars.
Totally.
It's I don't get it. It's baffling to me sometimes.
Well, and I think people, like, it can be a piece of your training program. Like, obviously, go shadow, go watch. Like, it can be a portion of it. But the entirety of your program should not be, well, you're going to follow Bob around for the next 3 days and then good luck. That can't be your whole program.
Get out the door.
Yeah. And it's a funny conversation we've had multiple times on the podcast. I was writing it down earlier as I was getting ready to record with you, because I saw this video and I can't remember where it was, but it was some kind of training conference, and there was a guy up on the stage and he was asking questions, and he asked a couple people in the audience. He was like, how much of your day is putting out fires, or dealing with headaches? How much of your day or your week? And there were multiple people that was like, oh, 70% of my day, 80%, 90% of my day is just putting out fires and dealing with mad customers or projects that aren't finished or whatever. And that guy was on stage, was like, if you had a training program, if you did a better job of teaching your employees, all of this would go away. Like, you wouldn't have to work. You could be focused on growing the business, or doing better with your marketing. Like, you could be focusing on a million other things, but instead you're dealing with headaches, and it's because you're not teaching your employees properly. And it was kind of this big, like, aha for me that, again, I feel like we've talked about it so much on the podcast with other guests and stuff, but it's so important. Like, go teach your team, like, and make sure that you have some kind of program in place to properly teach them, so that you then don't have to worry about dealing with the headaches.
Right. And, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, the book, I wrote the ebook, the secret sauce to profitability from a project management perspective. And just what you said, exactly what it is. I can't tell you how many times I talked to project managers, and I had it in my own company when I bought it, when I bought it. Oh, no, I'm putting out fires. And they pride themselves on being a fireman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you priding yourself on that?
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. And then everyone else around you is looking at you like you're a chicken with your head cut off, and you have no idea what you're doing. And because they look at it, they go, you caused this because you didn't plan something, you didn't plan it out. So now you're reactive. So, and just like you said, a lot of time I think leaders or owners too, they may not want to train, or they may feel like they should be training them. If they're considered the leader in the company, that they're the one who should be providing the training. Absolutely not. If you can, you should get up and be able to show that leadership in some aspects of it, but make the decision to put in a professional development program.
Yeah.
That's being a leader. Doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. That's being a leader. Show a genuine concern for your people. Show them that you want them to be professional, and you want them to be in unison. And you know what? it's a very big deal. And when you do that, your culture changes.
Yep.
It really, really does. And, it's not an oxymoron if you're out there listening. It
Yeah.
really does help. Now, do you expect you just gave this training course and you expect to come back and next day provide you that return on investment? No, it's not. It's going to take some time to sink in. But now then, as a leader, that's why I say when we put in our project manager certification course, so they attend that training, we ask the general manager or the construction manager or the owner, we want them in there too. And the reason being is because now they know what they should be holding them accountable for. And so now then that's being a leader, that's being a mid-level manager. And that's showing your leadership. Because now then I like to say that we answer the why, because a lot of times people do stuff just because somebody told them to do it.
Right.
And I mean, we had that in our last class, and the guy was like, I've been doing this for 24 years, and I never understood why we did that until now. And he had this huge aha moment. And then we had another one that said, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've been doing it all wrong. And that was a huge aha moment. So I think the biggest thing to take away from that is if you don't have something, then reach out, get some help. That's what we help you put in a professional development program free. We'll help you get, set up a budget, determine how you want to do it, put on that piece of it free. If you don't have somebody who's in your company that does it, then we can augment your staff and be able to help you do that as well and actually implement certain things.
Well,
So
that's the perfect way. I think, my follow-up question to all of this was going to be, and you dove right into it immediately, was like, yeah, I mean, there are owners out there that I'm sure are like, I want to train my team, but I just don't have the time. And so I love the putting in a plan, hiring, someone that has the time to do it. A common theme on the podcast, another common theme is like, almost without a doubt, every small business owner that I've interviewed and then talked about, oh yeah, this was at this point is when we really started to grow our business. Almost without a doubt, it was because they brought somebody in. It was because they hired somebody to take something off their plate. In this case, it's training. Like if you're to a point where you're dealing with fires and you've got a lot of employees that are struggling or don't know what they need to do every day, like, and you don't have the time to put the training program into place, let's bring somebody into your team that can handle it. Maybe it's something like Trifecta where you can hire this out, whatever it might be. Like, find a way to make this a priority, because if it's not, you're never going to get better.
right. And a lot of people think it takes a lot of time. It really
Yeah.
doesn't. I mean, you can put even if you just put a little bit of time into it, it's going to help your retention, your recruiting. Because when your team when that culture becomes together, that team has stuff to talk about. It allows you to grow. And number two, if people really like where they're working, they're going to ask their friends to come work with you. So, it helps with a recruiting program as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. That's the chicken and the egg conversation, right? It's like, people get frustrated. They're like, oh, I should have hired better employees. And in some cases that's true, but like, you can solve a lot of the hiring pains, because I mean, we could spend a whole other podcast talking about the recruiting piece, but you can solve a lot of those if you have a good training program in place, because you can get people that maybe wouldn't have been a good fit if you didn't have a program. You can get them to a point where they're a great employee by having a good training program.
Yeah, I just was talking with Jason Gilstrap. We did a webinar and we were talking about the recruiting protocols. How do you recruit? And I think in the TPA success algorithm that we wrote, we put in there, you need to recruit like a Green Beret. And it's a very delineated process. And so if you're hiring the wrong people, it's because you're not asking the right questions ahead of time. And if you're out there looking for that restoration unicorn, you're probably never going to find it. So you have to be able to get somebody that has potential and has capacity for it. And when you can get potential and capacity, now then you can train them to be able to learn stuff. And that's what you want. Because then they don't have any preconceived connotations of what's going on, and they're going to ask a lot of questions. So, but unless you don't like to be asked a lot of questions, and And then if you're getting asked a lot of questions, I'd say, well, you probably need to put a good training program in so that answers a lot of the questions and maybe
Exactly.
do some onboarding. So then you don't get
Yep.
piecemealed out with it. So chicken and egg
100%.
again.
The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course.
Well, so let's talk a little bit now. I think this is a perfect spot, Rod. Let's talk a little bit about what you guys are doing over at Trifecta. Talk a little bit about kind of what was the genesis of your idea for Trifecta Growth Institute. You're passionate about training. We've spent a bunch of time talking about why it's important and why business owners need it. What was the genesis behind Trifecta, and what are you guys doing over there that maybe separates you from other training or platforms or whatever it is?
Sure. Well, I did not plan on, creating Trifecta Growth Institute. When I sold my restoration company, I still had a couple other businesses, and I was thinking about, semi-retirement. And then I started a couple of companies asked me for coaching, so I started doing some coaching there. And then to replicate what we had done with my company, because I bought it when it was failing, and it was really bad. It was doing really terrible. And then we ended up getting profitable in about 4 months, and then turning it around. We were on some programs, and we skyrocketed up in the programs within 15 months. And so we got a lot of recognition for that. But so when I sold it, a couple companies had reached out and they said, hey, are you coaching, or what are you going to do? And I said, sure, I'll do some business coaching. So we took that on, at first, and then started doing some keynote speaking, and then speaking at Contractor Connections conference on how to turn around a failing business or a troubled business. And when I was up talking on the stage about it, and I was talking about the 3 biggest needle movers that, allowed us to, like you said before, take that business to the next level and turn things around and change the culture and get people, where they wanted to be there. And the second one was we implemented a training program and, got our project managers formal training. We took away all the independent theories and thoughts of why they were doing stuff. And so as soon as I said that, I said, man, this industry needs a training certification program for this. And because we have stuff in the water mitigation, we don't have it in the reconstruction. So then I came back, and that's when we got some trademarks, and we put in these programs, and we started developing them, and then started putting it on. And so Trifecta was born off of that concept. And, that in order for, our big why is growing businesses by growing people. Because the only way you can grow a business is first of all, be internally sound.
Yeah.
And your employees are your biggest piece of that. And so if you have the wrong employees, or like I said before, employees that don't have potential or they don't have capacity, then you've got to be able to determine, can you learn that? Can they become that? Do you have the right people? And if not, then we've got to think about how we're going to exchange that out to get the right people in there. And that's the first piece. And the second piece of it was to optimize, their operations. And, I've got believe it or not, a lot of people laugh at this, but I've got a computer science bachelor's degree, and I've got an industrial engineering master's degree. And industrial engineering is all about optimization, process, procedures, making things better. So I can't tell you how many times I've used that degree in business to come in and change things around, to make it the most efficient, to make it why you're doing certain things. And so we developed that to go into, as we train people, then we started looking at processes and procedures, and we changed that in the company, which was huge. And so that's kind of where Trifecta was born. And then, of course, taking the Green Beret piece of it and putting in leadership and developing leaders. It's a huge deal. So that's where the training, leadership, and coaching came in to where, what we're delivering here. And that piece of it. And the how is, we're doing it the most logical and efficient way. We're not trying to create a bunch of, smoke or anything like that. If we can help you, we would, we will. If not, we don't know. We'll tell you we don't know, or we can figure it out. I always say I don't know. If I say I don't know, it's not that we can't get there. We just got to figure it out. And then, so that's where the adaptive leadership comes in.
Yeah.
And if you got to be able to solve problems. If you can't solve problems, then you're maybe always going to get stuck. But if you can solve problems, or you can work with somebody, and maybe the problem is talking to somebody else,
Yeah.
then you grow.
I love that. I think the one of the coolest things that, we've got to have like a front row seat to, for lack of a better term, is these certifications that you've built out. And the reason I think the certification pieces are so cool is it feels like they're a portion of, especially, the home service restoration industry, that I feel like the certifications that you offer are areas that have been underserved a little bit. Which, one of them being like project management and project managers. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about those certifications, because I think that's one of my favorite things that you guys have done there. Obviously, the training and the leadership and the coaching, they're all awesome. But yeah, talk a little bit about those certifications, because again, I think they're portions of the industry that maybe haven't been served quite as well.
Yeah. So first of all, we have a couple things besides just those certifications.
Yeah.
So the people skills, we've been really developing a lot of products over the last year and a half. And a lot of those products are some micro courses for actual developing people skills, like we talked about. And so we have a learning center that you can create a professional development program very quickly, just to start one for less than $300 a person per year. And
awesome.
It's great, right? And we're adding another 150 this year to our database, training database. And so that gets you started. And then we can also be like a fractional learning officer to help guide you to putting that in. And we can do it with a very limited amount of time. And we also can incentivize it. Once you start with that, that's going to take care of your people and soft skills, right? That's where we really need to focus, where we don't do that enough. Now then, as we started getting into more of the technical skills and some of the mid-level managers, and now we're talking about these certifications because we're also giving people something that they can be proud of. It's also a recognition for your company and something you can market, and to show that you have qualified, trained people.
Yeah.
And it's a form of validation for the individual sometimes too, who may have maybe a little bit more fearful to like ask, or maybe if they don't know something, they maybe just brush it on the table, or maybe they'll ask somebody over here who maybe don't know it either, but maybe that person is a little bit too prideful and is going to tell them something either way, even if it's wrong. So I think that provides a huge credibility issue. It solves the credibility issue. It helps them have some type of recognition. It also creates the ability to show your customers that you are a subject matter expert, and also be able to relate with that. It gives you a foundation of why certain things are done. And so those are some of the big reasons I think it's beneficial. And you can visit our website, and we have a whole thing in there, but how's it beneficial to the individual? How's it beneficial to the company?
Right.
And so those are really the kind of the training folks we're doing. Although we are having a leadership program that we're actually developing too. It's going to come out later on this year. That's going to be a fun thing to do for people too, because, leadership if you're smart or not smart, if you're lucky, leadership starts at a very young age, depending on your background and how your upbringing and culture. You can see some people have it tougher than others, and some people may have a better pathway or they were introduced to it sooner. And then how that all kind of surfaced or came to fruition is many, many different paths. Or maybe there was no leadership or anything like that would resonate within what you're doing. But as soon as you get that role model, that mentor, sometimes it really helps you look at things differently.
Yeah.
And if we can create that early on, then I think that elevates our industry as well.
So good. I've been a big fan of what you guys are putting together. And I think it's setting you up to really help and develop a lot of companies that need this stuff. They need it bad. I mean, we've talked about it a bunch today that it's an industry that's been underserved with regards to like training and business development. And like, I think even specifically within the industry itself, like some of those roles like project manager, project coordinator, like those ones are even underserved as well. So I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. What's
Thanks.
what are some goals for the future, Rod? Like what are you guys hoping to accomplish the next year, 5 years, 10 years? What are you guys hoping to accomplish with what you're doing at Trifecta?
Well, I mean, we want to overall affect the industry. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I think that if we can, that's kind of why we put some of these products in there to make them inexpensive. But also, I think that if we don't do that, as this industry is growing, I mean, it really is, and it's also getting a lot more recognition on it and spotlights on it. And if we don't evolve as an industry at that point, I think it's going to have a bad connotation on it against carriers even or other areas. Because if we, because as we get more and more sophisticated things, a lot of the industry right now is putting a lot of things on software and a lot of different things like that. And, but we're never getting rid of people, and we're
Right.
never going to, and if we don't have the processes in the first place, or we don't have the foundation, software is not going to help you. And if we don't train people, I mean, how are we going to train people to use software or things like that if we don't train them on other things? And
Right.
we learn that. So that's one of our biggest goals. The second goal is really to have that those programs that we have to be fully implemented in something that's going to increase a company's value and help out companies create a professional development program. That's really probably the two main goals we have. And if we was to do a third one in there, we would want to be able to bring some type of development to any organization, even if you've got 6, 10, 12 people. Okay. If you don't do it now and you actually grow to 45, 50, now then you're starting over. And now instead of influencing 10, 6, 10, 12 people, now we've got to influence 15 or 20. So, I mean, start early, and that's what we want to do. If we can help people do that, then that meets our goals for the next year, 18 months.
Love it. Rod, it's awesome. I want to give you a chance here before we kind of dive into the last 3 questions we ask all of our guests, but I want to kind of give you a chance here. You already mentioned the website, but if people are interested, want to learn a little bit more, they're curious about, what you guys can do to help them. Where should they learn more about you guys? Obviously the website's the big one.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the website. You can actually click in the training area. You can see, click on that, all courses. It's going to take you right to our learning center. You can see what kind of courses we have. We have subscription plans there that for all levels of companies. We also have, some certifications in there. When we get into leadership, that program is going to come out a little bit later this year. Check on that. The other place you can do is go to LinkedIn, and we have a Trifecta Growth Institute page there, and we're getting a lot of people. So we put out a lot of good information on there. We put in some questions. We also have some project tips that you can check out and follow us. We're actually going to start to launch a couple things in there that will be some that in reference to where we're going to be at conferences coming up. And so we're going to be at Alacrity. I'll be speaking at Alacrity on the TPA success algorithm. And then I'll be at Contractor Connection, and we'll be doing, how to develop a stakeholder engagement, stakeholder engagement policy or program to help you identify those things. So you can come there and check us out as well. Plus, we're going to have a booth at both, or at the Contractor Connection. We'll have a booth at Contractor Connection. So any of those locations, and our contact information is on the website, so you can schedule a consult, or you can just send us an email. We're pretty easy to get a hold of if you're looking for something. So
love it. It's awesome. It's great info, Rod. Thank you. Again, this has been awesome. This has been a great discussion, and I know our audience is going to love a lot of our conversation today. And so,
thank you.
I want to just close up asking the same questions that we ask all of our guests. It's a great way to kind of unify all of our episodes. First question: favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently, or maybe that you've read or listened to in the past that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them, but one I just started. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant. And it's in reference to, it's okay to be able to think or rethink what you've learned and unlearn stuff, and then replace that with maybe a new thought or something that's kind of not the same. And the reason I'm reading that is because I think that a lot of times, as being in this industry even, or I see many times, and this is a statement I hate the worst. We've always done it that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the worst.
It's the worst one. And I get, well, okay, why? And well, I don't know, but we've always done it that way. If you don't know the why behind something and you say we always done it that way, you need to rethink and maybe unlearn why, or learn, first of all. So this book kind of tells you, or kind of sets you up to the point where, like, it's okay to rethink and ask yourself, is that correct for now or the setting?
Yeah.
It goes back to that adaptive leadership I talked about.
Yeah.
Let's be able to problem solve. Let's be able to look at facts, make some assumptions, and figure things out. So
I love
just
it.
into it, but it's so far it's hasn't disappointed.
Oh, it's a great recommendation. I love it. Second question. You wear a lot of hats. You're doing lots of things with Trifecta. You're traveling all over the place, going to all these awesome events. How do you relax at the end of a long day? How do you recharge your mental, emotional batteries? Or maybe how do you relax after the end of a long trip? You've been out, traveling to different events. What do you do to calm your mind and get back in a good headspace?
Yeah, it's always challenging. I do multiple things actually. We used to call it refit or recharge, get back into it. Like, you got to have some downtime. End of the day, I mean, a lot of times I do work a lot of hours, but I always try to have my dad and Carson time with my daughter, and my dad and Connor time with my son, and kind of just take that on.
Yeah.
And try to connect them. And then I also skydive at a competitive level.
That's
And
cool.
so I'm actually going, we'll be doing some competitions here in about, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. And I don't know if you've ever seen those iFly tunnels where they simulate skydiving.
Yeah.
My other company, we build those.
That's cool.
We built the one in Detroit. We built the one in Colorado Springs. We've done quite a bit of maintenance on them. And so I fly in that for training. And that's always the fun, relaxed piece of it. And then play golf and ride my motorcycle, ride my Harley as much as I can. So,
oh, it's awesome. That's it doesn't seem like a way to relax. Skydiving would be a way to relax, but it probably is a good way to clear your mind of everything else, because you got to focus on that one thing. There's no way to interrupt what you're doing, or you better not let it interrupt what you're doing, because it's important that you stay focused. So I love it. That's a great recommendation.
I mean, relaxing to me is it's competing was what I like, and so to me it does relax me. But you're right. I mean, for some people it may stress them out, and
it's awesome. It's a perfect way to reset the brain. I do it to a lesser extent with something like golf or fly fishing, whatever it is, like something that can just allow my mind to just focus on that for a couple of hours is super, super helpful for me to just, hey, I'm going to recharge for a little bit. I'm going to shut off, not worry about work, whatever it is. And yeah, it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. Sometimes you got to turn the phone off at a certain point, and and clear your mind. So there's many different ways, and I think I try to incorporate as many as I can, but it sounds like you have some good ones as well.
Yeah, it's great. Last question, Rod, and feel free to kind of take this whatever direction you want. You've obviously done a lot of really cool things in your career and owned businesses and been in the military and all of those things. If you could rewind to the beginning of your career, and it can be maybe just the beginning of Trifecta or the beginning of your restoration company or the beginning of your military career, if you could rewind to the beginning and tell younger Rod one thing, what would that one thing be?
Oh, buddy, that's a good question. I've actually often thought about this, to tell you the truth, and numerous times, especially when I see younger people. I think it's okay to be vulnerable. And when I went, I grew up, I didn't put it in there, but I grew up on a farm, and my dad was a truck driver. And so we were always, working and stuff of that nature. And then when I went into the military, it was like, man, there was a lot of high level people there that knew what they were doing. And so you always, one of the things was always be prepared, always be prepared, always be prepared. Don't find yourself, being, lacking preparation, which I still believe today. But don't go at it in a sense to where you won't allow yourself to be vulnerable and learn, because then that creates a blockage. And that, I tell my son this all the time, that creates rock brain. And, so don't get rock brain, be like a sponge instead, soak it all in, and, don't think you already know things or already expect it, and ask a lot of questions, and it's okay if you don't know.
Oh,
So
that's good.
I think that's what I would probably go back to.
Love it. The vulnerability piece. Yeah, I think you could call it a bunch of different things. You call it vulnerability or humility, whatever it is, but like being willing to like understand, like, I don't know everything, so I'm gonna go out and learn. I'm gonna go out and ask questions, and I'm gonna rub shoulders with cool people, and ask them about their lives. And yeah, I love that. I think that's it's something that's lost in the business world, especially where it's hustle and grind, and I'm gonna be the best, and I'm gonna be better than everybody else. And like there's some pieces of that are good, but at the end of the day, like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and ask questions, and surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I think that's great advice for a younger Rod, and for all of our listeners as well. So
it's still good for me today. So
it's great stuff, man. Oh, it's great. Rod, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was awesome. It was a great conversation. We got to have you on again in the future, because we could do a whole podcast of just stories from the military or stories from skydiving. I would love to have you on again. And so again, just thank you so much for coming on.
No, appreciate it, Hayden. And you guys have a great time. You guys are doing great things over at SOS, and I really appreciate all the assistance you helped us with. And so keep up doing the good work there. I really appreciate it.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.